Welcome back to another edition of the Pagcast. I'm your host, Michael Pagani, joined alongside senior writer covering the Minnesota for The Athletic, Michael Russo. Michael, thank you again for coming on the Pagcast.
No problem.
During this pandemic, a lot of people have turned on Netflix. How are you able to keep yourself busy?
It's actually been a lot of work. I feel like it's been almost more work than if you were going to cover a hockey season and traveling to 41 road games and 41 home games. It seems like every story takes a lot longer to write just because you're not covering hockey. You're almost inventing every single story. So I'm super excited that the Stanley Cup playoffs started yesterday and that the Wild, the team that I cover, actually drops the puck officially tonight, and I can actually write about stuff that's been going on. But other than that, it's been, like everybody else, been pretty much staying at home and, watching a lot of TV and just trying to get by in this very strange time that we're all living through.
Has your whole perception on the coronavirus changed since March when every league shut down?
Yeah. I remember the last podcast that I did right before the shutdown, somebody brought up to me if the NHL would potentially play without fans, and I said never. I'd never even imagined that you would actually shut down an entire sports league. But then I was doing a Wednesday night podcast, a different podcast that I do. And during that podcast, the NBA announced that they were suspending the season. And right when that happens, I remember I was driving home and a couple Wild players actually called me. They were playing Vegas the next night. And a couple Wild players called me to say what I was hearing. And I just said, well, look, NHL teams play in the same buildings as these NBA teams. The Utah Jazz were just in places like Detroit and I think Jersey, and Carolina was just in there. Like, you just knew that the league was going to have to follow suit. But this is just absolutely crazy. I never, ever envisioned that 24 teams would be playing in two bubble cities.
Well, you actually do run 3 podcasts. So what are the aim of those podcasts?
One is called the Russo Suhan Show. That's on the Talk North Network, and that is actually where essentially Jim Suhan, who's a columnist at the Star Tribune, sort of interviews me about hockey each week. The other one is the Athletic podcast called Straight from the Source. That's on the Athletic app and also Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. That's where I interview guests each week. And then the other one is called the Athletic Hour. That's actually on the radio station that I have an affiliation with here that I contribute to here in Minnesota called KFAN. It's one of the biggest sports radio stations in the Midwest. And we do essentially an hour a week podcast on there. That's also on their second radio station that the station has for overflow games and things like that. And then I contribute on Fox Sports North, and I do and KFAN is kind of my biggest passion. I love doing radio. I contribute there, several times a week.
So how busy is your life, would you say?
It's busy, but it's it beats really working for a living. Being a sports writer is the most fun that you could possibly have. I would say that our jobs take on such a huge portion of our lives that if you're going to do something, you better enjoy it. You better love it. And I absolutely love this job. I've done it since I was a teenager, since I was even before your age. I started 15 years old and a couple newspapers in South Florida, and grew up in the business, and it's a great life. So, it's busy work. It's a lot harder now just because everything's done by Zooms, and the way that I feel like you have to do this job well is to have really good relationships with players, face-to-face contact with GMs, coaches, sources, and to do everything by Zooms and really, not very organic makes this job a lot harder. But hey, it's the life that we lead now.
How do you make sure you don't run out of topics to talk about on those 3 podcasts?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that sometimes I find myself repeating a lot of things that I do say. And I think that is the danger of having so many podcasts. You also have the danger, as you know, of becoming overexposed. We see it. How many times do you, as a hockey fan, watch a broadcaster on TV and you're like, oh, I hate him, and it's really just because you hear him, you're tired of him. And so there's a danger of sometimes saying the same thing on too many places, or having your voice or your face on too many things, and that does become an issue. So it is. I think it takes a lot of prep work to try to not repeat the same thing every single show, but sometimes I don't do the greatest job of that.
With hockey starting yesterday, was there a specific game that caught your eye?
I just was shocked at the first Carolina Rangers game. I'll say that at just the way that Carolina went right after the Rangers, and really just showed that if you dip your toe into this playoffs, you're probably going to be out very, very quickly. It's the playoffs immediately right now, and so that was the big thing that I noticed. But I loved all the games. I thought the Pittsburgh Montreal game was fascinating to watch. Obviously, the only overtime game yesterday as well. And then watching two 12 seeds in Montreal and Chicago win, I don't know if that's the league's worst nightmare or what they wanted all along by putting these two big markets in there. But that is the danger now. Is suddenly, you have Pittsburgh and Edmonton on the ropes very quickly in a best-of-5 series.
Well, I think that, one of the things that caught my eye was the amount of penalties that were taken in
Yes.
the New York and Carolina game, plus the Montreal game. So I believe that, with this day two today, the refs could relax their whistles.
Yeah, that's the hope. I think that they're trying to set the standard right off the hop, and almost forgetting that it's the playoffs, right? And usually the whistles are a little less plentiful. Maybe these referees were just bored after being away from the game like the rest of the players for 5 months and wanted to just let everybody know they still exist. I don't know. I did a really big story on what the officiating could be like and referees in the bubble the other day in the Athletic that I highly recommend people reading. But I agree with you. I think it got a little too much yesterday, and I'm one of those people that would love to see 5-on-5 play a little more in these playoffs.
Because I believe that the game should be decided 5-on-5 rather than on special teams.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, look, it's part of the game. If they're egregious penalties, I think you call it. But I think we're used to seeing, a little more let go in the playoffs. And my guess is just like how early in the season, in a regular season, you always see a ton of penalties called almost like the referees just let the players know this is what we expect. I think that as this playoff round continues, as we get into the actual, best of 16 playoffs, I think that we'll see less and less the referees becoming a factor. At least I hope so.
What would you say is your outlook for the series against the Canucks?
I like the way that the Wild match up against them. I think it's going to be very important that Minnesota stays on the attack, forechecks the heck out of the puck, and spends a lot of time in the offensive zone to keep Pettersson and Besser and JT Miller and Bo Horvat away from their defensive zone. And the Wild, 5-on-5 offensively, we're actually one of the top teams in the league. Their power play was absolutely on fire down the stretch, especially after the coaching change where Dean Evison took over. And so this should be a really well-played series. I don't think the Wild want to trade chances with the likes of Horvat and Miller and Besser and Pettersson, but the Wild have shown that they can score goals, with the best of them, even though that I think a lot of fans, if you ask them deep down, they would never put the Wild in that category of being one of the top offensive teams in the league.
Would you agree the Wild were trending in the right direction after the coaching change?
Yeah, I think that they were actually starting to trend in the right direction a little before the coaching change. But you're right. But look, they were 8-4 under Dean Evison, won 8 of their last 11 games, and definitely that last couple of weeks they were playing really, really well. Had a great win in Edmonton, a great win in Vancouver, a great win in Anaheim, a great win in San Jose, and just started to play more and more, on the attack with a little more freedom offensively, I would say. And look, Bruce Boudreau, I think, was trying to tighten things up just because their goaltending was so bad this year that I think that he felt like they had to start winning 2-1, 3-2 hockey games where Dean, when he took over, it was almost like we have nothing else to lose. Alex Stalock sort of became the everyday number one for this team over Dubnik, who wasn't playing well. And they definitely fared well down the stretch there before the pause.
Do you think that the emergence of Kaapo Kähkönen, the third-string Minnesota Wild goalie, could push Devin Dubnik out of the picture?
That's a definite potential. I mean, he's got 1 year left on his contract. His cap hit is over 4, but the buyout is very, very reasonable, and so there's a chance that happens. And we'll see. I mean, as we're recording this right now, I can't tell you 100% who's starting in goal tonight in Game 1 against the Canucks, whether it's Stalock, Dubnik, or Kähkönen. Part of coming into camp where I thought Kähkönen fared really well is I wondered if Billy Guerin would essentially say to Dean Evison, hey, play Kähkönen, let's see what we got in this guy so we can make a decision in the offseason regarding the goaltending. But so far, that certainly doesn't seem to be the case. But I definitely think that they've got to, at some point here, figure out if Kähkönen, who was the goalie of the year in the AHL, is definitely the quote unquote goalie of the future. And if that's the case, that's definitely going to spell the end of Devin Dubnik at some point.
If the Wild do drop down this, down 1-0 this series against Vancouver, how important is it to reassess the goalie situation?
I think that it's, that's the interesting thing, I think, with all these teams in this short playoff series. You're seeing with Vegas with Fleury and
Leonard.
Same thing here is that there's no room for error. So in a normal series where if you drop down, you fall down 2-0, like when the Wild in 2014 were playing against Colorado and Brizgalov started and they fell down 2-0, you knew Kemper was coming in game 3. Here it might be that way after game 1. And, part of me is why, I'm not 100% who's going to be in goal tonight, because part of me says, all right, go with the guy that was playing great down the stretch that the team seems to play better in front of in Alex Stalock. But the other part of me is let's see if Dubnik can play well. He's been in this position before. He usually starts seasons on time. And then, see if you can get a win. And then if all of a sudden the wheels come off Dubnik, then at least you have that, energy guy coming in from the bullpen that the team seems to rally around in Stalock. So, it'll be interesting to see how Dean Evison and all these coaches handle being down 1-0 in a series if you're not getting the goaltending. Like right now, the chance of Mike Smith starting for Edmonton game 2 is very, very slim, right?
That's correct. He did actually, it was part defense, but he also did give up a goal right to Dylan Strome, I believe. It was the second goal or something like that for Chicago. And it was just a poor puck play by him.
Yes, and I had Dylan Strome on my fantasy team, and I didn't put him in the lineup, and so I almost threw the clicker against the wall at the time. No, I agree. I mean, that's the thing with Mike is that, sometimes he can be really, really erratic. We saw that the last couple of years in Arizona and Calgary, and he certainly didn't seem to be, off to a great start in the series.
Is it crazy to you at all to realize that one of these qualifying round teams that are playing could or will get Lafreniere?
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think that any hockey fan that's cynical, like most sports writers are, would assume that whoever loses between Pittsburgh, Chicago, and Edmonton, one of those 3 teams is probably getting Lafreniere. I know that you're hoping that if it's Montreal, who's getting them. But I could tell you that here in Minnesota, I put out a poll the night of the draft lottery saying, who would you rather in goal, Stalock and Dubnik or Michael Russo? And about 70% of the people said me. So Wild fans are starved for that game breaker, that blue chip prospect at the top of the draft, and something they haven't had since the days of Marion Gaborik.
Well, I can tell you that as a Habs, or, I'm pretty sure a lot of Chicago Blackhawk fans can agree with me here, those 2 teams don't have any business being in this year's playoffs. So it's kind of like a crapshoot whether you want to cheer for the wins or do you want to cheer for getting a 1-in-8 shot at getting Lafreniere.
Well, it's going to be really interesting. Like if you fall down 2-0 in a series, if all of a sudden the coach starts making really mysterious, bizarre lineup decisions, the GM's said to him, let's just take our chances on the 12.5% to get Lafreniere.
Getting into your story bit here, who influenced you to start sports journalism?
It's a great question. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved being a sports journalist. I grew up my first 12 years in New York. I had a paper route. I used to read all the newspapers while I was doing my route, but I was really into pretending like I was a play-by-play guy. I'd sit in front of the parents' bed or the couch with a flashlight and pretend it was a microphone and call games. And then I moved to Florida, and really we had no hockey down there. We had a minor league hockey team called the West Palm Beach Blaze. In the Sunshine Hockey League. Bill Nyrup, who played for the Canadians, ran the league, ran the team, was the GM, the owner, and the coach of the West Palm Beach franchise, but was the actual commissioner of the league. And really learned a lot about the game. But I was already in the newspaper at that point. And, I just when I was in high school, I knew right away that I was no athlete, and so I used to do the public address announcing at all the games, whether it was football or basketball or baseball. And I befriended all the sports writers, because the hardest thing when you cover high schools as a sports writer is you got to keep your own stats. You got to walk the sidelines, even if it's a snowstorm or in Florida, a rainstorm. And so the sports writers loved me because not only would I call the games, but I'd keep the stats and then I would give it to them after the game. And I just befriended them. And next thing I know, I got my foot in the door at both the Boca Raton News and the Sun Sentinel, and just grew up in the business and really never left. And I mean, it's crazy how long I've done this now. It's we're talking well over, we're talking 30 something years, 25 as a NHL writer. And I've only really had 3 jobs. I worked for the Sun Sentinel, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and now the Athletic here for the last, in about exactly a month, almost 3 years here.
From 1990 to 2005 is when you did report for the Sun Sentinel with the Florida Panthers. Fans joke about the Panthers' attendance all the time, but do you think it's a serious issue that owners should consider?
Well, I mean, you got to understand the context of those games down there. Is that that team, when they first got down there, they sold out every single game at Miami Arena. There was, I think, an attendance max of 14,723. Then they moved into National Car Rental Center, which is the current arena they play in, which I think is what's it, BB&T now, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's probably too big. It's 19,000 seats. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere along the Everglades. But when they first moved in there, they sold out every game. They had Pavel Bure. He scored 58 and 59 goals there in his first 2 years with the team, his first 2 full seasons with the team. And people loved him. In 1990, in the year 2000, they had 98 points, and that was pre-loser points. They looked like they were going to have a real legitimate chance of winning the cup. And ever since, they haven't won a playoff round since 1996. They've gone years and years and years in a row without doing anything in the playoffs. And, when that happens and you're in South Florida, where there's so much to do, you quickly become irrelevant. And that's what's gone on with the fans there. This has really nothing to do with the fan base down there. There's a ton of hockey fans down there. But if you're going to spend your hard-earned cash, you want to go see a winner. And the Panthers, they've been a very unstable team, changing ownerships, changing managers, changing coaches for years. They haven't had any postseason success, and that's why the crowds have been so low. But I promise you, if they could get their crap together and become a perennial winner there, the fans down there who love winners will embrace it and come to that arena and watch them. I mean, just look across the state. The Tampa Bay Lightning is one of the most successful franchises in sports. Why? Same Floridian fan base, same fans that have come from the Northeast to retire down there, but they give them a reason to show up. They have a winner every single year.
Do you think so? Would you agree that most Florida fans would just travel all the way to Tampa Bay to see a winner? Because obviously they are starving for wins.
Yeah, no, I don't think that South Florida fans would travel there, especially because it's hard to get into that arena. I mean, you've got to be a Lightning fan. They barely let you wear the gear of another team down there. But what I'm saying more is that hockey could be 100% successful in South Florida if the organization would get their act together and give people a reason to show up.
You co-authored a book in 2000 called Rising Stars, the 10 Best Young Players in the NHL.
Yeah.
Was the aim of that book to kind of grow the game for younger kids?
Well, it was a Sports Illustrated for Kids book. I still remember I was at a hotel in Atlanta in the middle of the summer, and the editor or one of the editors at the SI for Kids book used to be the PR guy for the Florida Panthers. He called me. His name was John Kramer, and he pitched this idea of co-writing this book with Mike Brem, and gave us the 10 guys that would be in it. And I just thought it would be a fun idea. I joked that they told me that it needed to be a 3rd or a 5th grade level writing. And that's basically the level that I write at anyway. So I'm like, oh yeah, it'd be perfect. It's funny. I've had a gazillion opportunities to write books. I didn't exactly love the process. I'm not, I'd almost, in the off season, I want to enjoy my off season and not just sit at a laptop every day. And I'm amazed. I'm actually inspired by the authors, the writers, the wordsmiths that could actually sit down and just churn out book after book after book. It's not my thing.
So you wouldn't consider writing a future book?
I mean, I would consider it, but probably not. I mean, I think it would be incredibly satisfactory, like the second it's over, to say, all right, here's my book. But the act of doing it is to me, the labor intensive is just not my thing. I'd rather go for a walk or listen to music or hang out with buddies rather than, especially now, because our off season is going to be extremely limited and uncertain and unclear when it is. I just don't know if it's something that I'm going to want to ever do.
In 2010,
I'll tell you one thing. If I ever did it, it would probably not be about hockey. It would need to be about some other passion that I have, whether it's music or something like that.
In 2010, the NHL selected you as a journalist to go cover the 2010 Olympics. Did you cover hockey, or what sports did you cover?
Well, the Star Tribune sent me to the Olympics in 2010 in Vancouver, and I covered, I covered the entire hockey tournament. But the way it works in the Olympics is that the first week, especially if the NHL is involved, is that the players are still back playing in the NHL. But I was already in Vancouver, so I covered luge up there. I covered some Lindsey Vonn skiing up there. I covered one of those hot dog ski events as well. So it was pretty fun. It was awesome to go up to Whistler and cover those. But I mean, I absolutely love the hockey tournament and being able to cover every single game there. And then to be in the building at the GM place when the United States forced overtime on a Parisi goal, coincidentally, and then Sidney Crosby won it in overtime. It was just awesome to be right there in the middle of it.
Could you tell me your story about the Crosby golden goal?
I was just sitting there, and it was like one of those things. Right when right when the play developed, you just knew the game was ending, right? From my perspective, again, this is before Zach Parise played for Minnesota, but as the Minnesota journalist in there, to me, the story was how he forced overtime. And so I wrote mostly from that perspective on the disappointment of the United States coming so close and really having an incredible tournament. Beating Canada in the early rounds, and then coming back and then playing this great game. And there were so many great Minnesota players on that United States team as well. So I pretty much went with that perspective. And then from a Wild perspective, the Wild had a ton of guys in that tournament. I mean, guys like Gaborik, they had three Finns in Koivu, Nicholas Backstrom, and Antti Miettinen. Some Swedes as well. So it was a heck of a ability to and a real pride of mine that I got to cover that.
I gotta say that the U.S. had all the momentum going into the overtime frame.
Yes, no doubt about it. And I still remember the goal that Zach scored. I think Rafalski maybe set it up. But it was just an awesome experience. And that's one of the things that I'll cherish in my career is not only just covering the hockey, but getting to be around the Olympics and going to the opening and closing games. I've never had that experience before. Going up to Whistler, I wound up in the middle of sort of an international event. There was a luger for the United States that was an absolute star that was wrapping up his career. His name's Tony Benshoff. He's right here from White Bear Lake. So I was up there sort of doing features on him and shadowing him when that poor luge athlete from the Republic of Georgia passed away on the track. So I had to cover that from a sort of an international standpoint. And, it just shows you how, you think you're going up there to just do a normal everyday feature on luge. And next thing you know, you're in the middle of this international incident that was so much bigger than the sport itself.
How critical is it to have connections within the hockey world in order to cover a team at the NHL level?
It's huge. I mean, the whole point of this job is relationship building, proper interview techniques, and multiple and ample sources. And a lot of it's longevity. I've covered this league a long time, so I have a lot of people that I know and know well. And I think that the other thing is especially in hockey, the people that are involved in the game, they have such an immense respect and love for the sport that if they recognize right away that the beat writer doesn't have that work ethic or that passion or that love for the sport itself, they're just not going to respect you. Where I think with most people that know me personally or read my stuff or have everyday dealings with me, they know that my entire life is hockey. And it's writing about the sport to the readers that are diehard fans. And so, that's part of this job is just, it's working hard. To me, it's so much better than being it's so much more than being a good writer. It's being a good reporter, but it's having these incredible relationships that you could sort of forge with these subjects that you're writing about to then be able to have them trust in the fact that you're going to be able to tell their story. Beyond just what's going on the ice. These are human beings, they're people. And that's what I enjoy about working for The Athletic is that I get to tell these stories and give people that are fans of the team that I'm covering a lot more belief and feeling that they know the athletes that they're fans of.
Do you get a feeling that hockey players are put on some sort of pedestal and act as the superheroes?
I mean, it depends. I think that that all athletes, if you're a fan of them, you have an immense amount of respect for them just right off the hop, right? I mean, if they're putting on your, I mean, just think of any time like somebody that was a rival of your team suddenly slips on the jersey for the first time, how much you immediately switch allegiances and become a fan of them. It's all to do with the team that you're a fan of, and because of that, these players are given this platform where there's just automatically respected and liked.
What factors play into successful reporting?
I think it's listening. I think it's too many journalists sit there and they write down every question. They don't listen to the conversation that you're having when you're sitting down at a locker. I don't know if we'll ever get to do that again, but sitting down with a locker with a player and chatting with them. It's creating this relationship where they feel they could trust you and not ever burning them. I think that's a lot harder in today's day and age because I think because of all the outlets that all of us writers have between doing podcasts and radio and TV and Twitter and all this stuff, you almost have multiple ways that you could potentially, for lack of a better term, burn a player where they feel like that you said something that was inappropriate. I almost like if I ever have a disagreement with a player, it's usually because of something that came out of my mouth rather than something I used to write. Where years and years and years ago, when a player was ticked with you, it was because of something you wrote in the newspaper. But I think, to me, being a good reporter and doing this job well is, again, relationships and work ethic. And if you have that, and a love for the sport, and if you have those three things, you're going to be successful at this job.
What about your style of writing? Do you like that gets the fans' attention?
I think it's more conversational. It's anecdotal. I always joke that my best writing are quotes. I almost feel like that you, as Michael, the hockey fan, would rather hear what the player is saying today rather than what Michael Russo is writing today, and so that's kind of it is, for lack of a better term. I probably have too many quotes in my stories. I would rather hear from what Zach Parise or Ryan Suter saying than what Russo's writing. So, but I would say that I'm not the greatest wordsmith, but then there are some stories that I write that I'm really proud of, and they're usually anecdotals. I usually try to paint a scene at the beginning that I could carry through the whole article.
Do you buy into the whole clickbait idea?
I don't like clickbaiting. I definitely don't like headlines to try to be manufactured or styled, put in a stylistic way where it's just, to be clickbait, to get fans to just open up a story that they're going to be disappointed by just because we put a headline on it to get people to lure them in. And so I don't like clickbaiting at all.
As a reporter, one of the main goals is to remain credible as long as possible. How long did it take you to get to that level?
A while. I mean, I almost feel like it happened toward the end of my tenure in the Sun Sentinel. I think you do have to be covering this league a long time to be able to just naturally develop sources and develop relationships. And usually when a person is traded from a team or fired from a team and they move on to another team, you're usually going to have a really good relationship with that player. There are guys in this league that I've covered years ago. That I'm still really, really tight with today. I was joking with them recently is that just what are the chances? But like about 3-4 weeks ago, within 10 minutes of each other out of the blue, two guys texted me that happened to be traded for each other in 1998 for the team that I was covering. Like, here we are 22 years later, and the two people just happened to text me to check in on me. And these are players on a team. And I think that says it all, is that you need to have that type of relationship.
With the NHL reporting 0 phase 4 COVID-19 tests, how has that reassured you that this whole bubble thing will work?
I think it's going to work. I think that, I've done so many stories on COVID-19 that I feel like I know everything about COVID-19. And the one thing I know is that it takes about 3 to 5 days from the point of you being exposed to the virus to testing positive. So the fact that these players have been in the bubble now for 6 days and there have been 0 positive tests, I think it'd be absolutely almost impossible for COVID to now infiltrate this bubble as long as the bubble is tight. And that means most likely the people that are going to really need to be safe are the workers, some of the people that maybe are able to kind of escape the bubble at times, which the NHL is trying to not allow that to happen.
A lot of players, or one in specific, Kazimir Kaskasuo of the Toronto Maple Leafs, is documenting life in the bubble. How do you like that idea being documented by players?
I love it. I'm doing a diary every other day with Marcus Foligno. They've been some of the most enjoyable stories that I've written the last 3 days. I'm sort of ghostwriting for him. Basically, he'll call me up. We talk for about 20 minutes, and then I write it up in his own words. And he's also sending me pictures and videos and really painting a great picture and giving athletic readers that are wild diehards a real good sense of what it's like to be in the bubble.
At the start of June, when Gary Bettman made his whole return to play announcement, what were you thinking?
I wasn't positive it was going to happen because I felt for what we just talked about, by allowing these players to essentially do what they wanted to do for phase 2 and 3 and go out into society and public, that it was just natural that they're going to be positive tests. But man, do I give these players and staff that are all in these traveling parties tremendous credit that they seem to, especially that last week, go to the rink, go home, go to the rink, go home, go to the rink, go home. And I think that kept everybody safe because the key was getting to that bubble healthy. Because of that 3 to 5 day rule, you could conceivably, like, say all these guys flew there on Sunday. If they all went out Saturday, were exposed to the virus, it would take 4 days for people to even know if they were positive. And by that point, you've now spread it across the bubble. So the fact that these players have 0 positive tests, I think that says a lot about their respect level, maturity, and the fact that they want to make sure that this season is completed.
Well, another thing that's just insane is that how the MLS and NBA both have reported either 0 or low COVID-19 tests, positive tests, especially being in Orlando.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, it says everything again about the bubble and why baseball was this is insane how they tried to get this to happen. You just can't. And it makes me think about how, next season, the start of next season, are they going to have to start next season in maybe 4 different bubbles? I just can't see that by December 1, which is the tentative start date for the 2021 season, that we're all going to be allowed to just get on airplanes again, go into any arena again, that fans will be in the crowd again. So I think it just shows you that even down in Orlando, which is right now ground zero, for COVID in this country, the fact that Florida, that despite what's going on outside and, despite what's going on down the block, it's not getting into the bubble.
This year's playoffs, the Minnesota Wild have escaped some of the top Central teams. We're talking about Colorado, St. Louis, Winnipeg. How big of an opportunity is it for the Wild to prove themselves against Vancouver?
I think it's huge. I think they match up well. The big thing is, the way I look at it is the Wild have lost 16 in the last 20 playoff games. And that's in the sort of Koivu, Suter, Parise era. And these guys are now, Mikko's in the last year of his contract. This could be it for him in the National Hockey League. Parise's 36, Suter's 35. They've got to win at some point here because these careers are not infinite. And even though they have, term left on their deal, Suter and Parise, they are itching to get to the Stanley Cup. So now, to me, they've got a great matchup in Vancouver to try to get back into that, quote, first round. And we'll see what happens here. But I think this is just an absolute huge opportunity for them to really get themselves into this tournament of 16 and try to make some noise in a very unprecedented postseason where anything can happen.
How big has been the emergence of Kevin Fiala to the team?
It's just been unbelievable. And I give Paul Fenton credit. He identified Fiala as the guy that he wanted for Granlund, and he went and got him. And he told us all that this was going to be the player that he was going to become. And again, we've only seen it. He had a really good overall year, but really where he became an absolute star was the last 5 weeks of the season before the suspension of the season. And now can you be the guy every day in the playoffs, or then can you turn it into a consistent 82-game season? That is what the true stars do in the National Hockey League. Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, Connor McDavid, Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews, Patrick Kane, McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog. These are not 5-week players. These are 82-game players, and that's going to be the next step that we're going to have to see if Fiala can evolve into. He seems to certainly want to. He seems to have the talent to do that. And that, I think, is what's so exciting for Wild fans, is that every day we're watching a guy on the ice where every single shift you look at him and you can see that he wants to be the best player on the ice that shift.
Who is one prospect in the Minnesota Wild organization that should get fans hyped?
Well, Kirill Kaprizov, he's going to get he can't play in this tournament, but tomorrow on Monday he's going to have a meeting with the consulate in Moscow, and then if that's approved, then he gets his P1 U.S. work visa. He actually could potentially be on a plane by Tuesday. But he's just been an absolute star. Led the KHL twice in goal scoring, won a championship in the KHL, scored the Olympic golden goal in 2018 in Yep, there you go. And so, that's the deal now, is can he come here, step foot into the NHL, and be a Calder Trophy candidate right away, and be the star that this team hopes that he is here, that we've seen from YouTube videos and on Twitter highlights.
How honorable is it for your work to be recognized and for you to be named the Minnesota Sports Writer of the Year 4 times?
It's really humbling, especially because, stuff like that is that's colleagues voting for you, right? It's not fans. It's colleagues of mine. So it really is humbling. This year I actually shared it with Lavelle Neal III, who's the baseball writer at the Star Tribune, who's a really, really good friend of mine. And that's probably my biggest regret of the pandemic, is that he and I didn't get to go down to North Carolina to the award ceremony and, share a cigar and have a glass of scotch and all that type of stuff that Lavelle and I do when we usually hang out as buddies.
Did you ever think about the award during the season?
No. That stuff is just, it comes to you. It's like anything. It's humbling. It means a lot, obviously, just from a self-pride standpoint. Sometimes what it does is just kind of reaffirm, all right, I'm doing an okay job. Because like any job, as much as you love your job, there are days that you wake up and you're not nearly as confident. You think, all right, I'm fooling everybody. I'm not nearly as good. Or sometimes you need that jolt of praise to make you do this job, better and harder than you would have done it that day, because you're just exhausted, especially at midseason when we find out if you win this award. So every single time, Dave Gorin is the one that runs the NSMA. And every time that phone rings and it's him and it's January, you just kind of get excited. You're like, wow, this is pretty neat. I remember I won the now you're getting me talking like pompous here, but I won the first ever Red Fisher Award, which you probably know well. Red Fisher, being a Montreal Canadiens fan, he's a legend. And same type of thing. I get this phone call. They had never done this award before. I didn't even know the award was going to exist. The Professional Hockey Writers Association, everybody voted, and I got it. I think it was a narrow win over Aaron Portzline and Larry Brooks, if I remember correctly. And but I remember Glenn Sader was the one that informed me that I won the award, and it was the same type of thing. It's just like, wow, this is amazing. Here's a guy that I looked up to when I was in the business as a young sports writer. Every time you go into the Bell Center and be in the rafters and Red Fisher came up to you, you just felt like you're talking to the god of hockey writing in Canada. And so, when stuff like that happens, it is humbling, because trust me, this is not a job that you do to try to win awards.
Last question here on the Pagcast. Do you have any advice for aspiring sports journalists?
I think just try your best to get your foot in the door. I think what you're doing, Michael, is incredible. I mean, obviously, you're very, very good at it. This has been a well-run interview, one of the better ones that I've done in weeks. But I think it's important. I think you want to try to network and talk to people that do this job, and try to talk to people that are in the shoes that eventually you want to get to, because it's a cutthroat job. The media business is shrinking. It's hard to get your foot in the door. So I always tell people to try to master everything, right? Do podcasts, try to, get comfortable in front of a camera, in front of a microphone, because that's the other thing in this job, is that you can't just do one thing anymore. You've got to be a multimedia. You have to be able to do all sorts of multimedia stuff. So, but if you can get yourself into a newspaper or into a PR department or something to just get in there, then it's up to you. Once your foot's in, it's up to you to make it work. And that's what happened to me at the Sun Sentinel, is I got my foot in the door, and then it's just a matter of working your absolute butt off and volunteering to do anything. And also be patient. You know, nobody could just become, very few people can just all of a sudden wind up on a major radio station or a TV station or go write for the Athletic or a major newspaper daily and cover the Montreal Canadiens. It takes a while. You got to be willing to kind of grind it out, and those times where you get disappointed, just keep on going forward. And that would be my biggest advice to any young aspiring journalist.
I'd like to thank Michael Russo, who covers the Minnesota Wild for The Athletic. Thank you again, Michael.
Yep, anytime, Michael.